Hello friends, welcome to TechnoGeek SFDC. So in today's video of integration series, we are going to see what are name credentials, what are auth providers, and why the name credentials are being introduced and why we are using it. Okay, so before we jump into the actual org demo and see all the other stuffs of how to set it up, we will first see what name credentials are. So name credentials was a secure framework which has been provided by Salesforce to secure your authentication related information. So they are basically part of your security architectures. Okay, so for example, whenever we do any call out to any third party system, we provide certain informations like username, password, or consumer key, consumer secret, and all this. They are very sensitive information to connect with any other system, or basically the provider system. So in integration we have two basically players. Okay, one is your provider, one is your consumer. Provider is basically who is providing the service or data. Okay. And consumer is basically who is consuming the service or retrieving the data. So when a consumer has to connect with a provider, they need certain sensitive informations from provider like consumer key, consumer secret, and all other some sensitive informations. Okay, by using which the service consumer, when the consumer will try to access the provider's data, provider will first check whether the authentication information has been successfully provided or not, or whether they are a valid authentication parameters or not. Okay, if it is not valid, then your provider will reject the request for retrieving the data. Okay, so this is a very simple terms of how the authentication or how the retrieval of data happens. And here the sensitive informations are passing over web, so there can be chances that these informations can be accessed or can be hacked by some other third party system or anyone else, and they can use it in a different ways. Okay, so to avoid these types of issues, Salesforce provided a secure framework that is your named credentials. Okay, where you don't need to basically we are not passing the actual informations over the web, but we are passing an encrypted version of it. So basically these informations are stored in Salesforce, but we are passing an encrypted version of it to the provider, so that the provider can easily check uh, whether the values provided are correct or not, and it will be safe when we are traversing over the web. Okay, so this was an whole and soul scenario of why the name credentials came into picture. Okay, now in today's video we will see how we can connect to Salesforce Aux by using the name credential, and then how we are going to use it in our normal HTTP callout to retrieve some information. Okay, so to start with, I have two augs here basically. Okay, one is my provider, one is my consumer. So let's assume that this is my provider org where you are seeing Namo Savita Def. Okay, so this is my provider org. Okay, and I have one consumer org as well. So this is my consumer org, which is going to be, that is Kerala Global Solution 60. Okay, so this will be my consumer org. Both are DevOps only. Okay, and now next thing is I need some information from my provider org to authenticate with the to authenticate with my consumer org. Okay, so for that, what if you have been watching this series from starting, so in my first video I have seen how we can create the connected apps. So connected apps are storing those informations which consumer will use to authenticate with the provider server. Okay, so in our previous video, we have already seen the connected apps creation. So I'll be using one of the existing connected apps. If you haven't seen how we can create a connected app, then you can just click on the eye icon coming somewhere on the top right. So you can just go to that video and you can see how we can create the connected apps. Okay. So I'll be using one existing connected app, and we will see how we can do the further stuffs. Okay. So in our case, let's say I'll be using this sample app. Okay, so from connected app we need basically, okay, so it will ask me for a verification code. Yeah, because these are the secured information, so Salesforce always wants high level security on these types of information. Okay, so now this is my consumer key and this is my consumer secret. Okay, now so so till now what we have seen is our provider org, okay, which will provide the data. Now let's come to our consumer org. In consumer org, before creating a named credential, we need to create an auth provider. So what auth provider is? Auth provider is again an internal framework of the Salesforce, which will store the information regarding the authentication. So when a named credential will get called, okay, internally it will do an authentication with the provider system. Okay, and how this authentication should happen, that information you will store in the auth provider. Okay, so for creating an auth provider first, so our step is first we need to create an auth provider and then we will create a name credential. So we can just go to auth provider and then you can click on new. So Salesforce has already provided a lot of provider type options like Facebook, Apple, Git, Globe, Google, LinkedIn, all those stuff. So OpenID, Connect, MuleSoft. So in our case, since we are connecting to Salesforce orgs, so I'll be selecting the provider type as Salesforce. Okay. Now, next thing is I need to provide the name. Okay. So I'll put it as demo provider. Okay, this will automatically get provided URL suffix. Consumer key is now something which I can take from here. Okay, and then next is my consumer secret. So I'll be using consumer secret from my provider org. Okay, now what is my authorization endpoint URL? So basically, which endpoint this system will hit to do the authorization. Okay, so for that, what we have to do is we need to use our domain URL. Okay, so these informations will be provided by your provider system. So let's say if you're not connecting with Salesforce or but with a SAP or any Java application or something else, you can definitely ask those team to provide you these informations. These informations they will provide so that you can connect with their system. Okay, so let's say I'll put slash services. It will be uh, services auth 2 slash authorize. Okay, so this will be slash services. Okay, this will be slash authorize. Okay. Similarly, for token endpoint, so after authorization, you get a security token. Okay, or you get a basically session ID or a security token by using which you do a next call out to get the information. So in any call out, there are two steps first. First is your authentication or authorization, and then next step is your accessing the data. So authorization will give you a token by using which you do the data extraction. Okay. Now here instead of this, I'll just use token. Okay, and then default scope I leave it as is. If you have any error, you can pass any URL so that during the authorization, if any error happens, so the whole system will be redirected to that particular URL. Similarly, during the logout, if you want, you can log out to a separate URL. Okay. Similarly, there is a registration handler. So if you have some custom logic of doing the registration, that you can use the registration handler. So if you just click on this link, it will create a class in backend Apex class, and then you can use that Apex class for the registration handler. We will create another video on a detail on how the registration handler can also be used in the Salesforce. Okay. And then next is if you want to run this whole authorization in context of some user, that also you can do by selecting the execute registration as any user. Okay. Now, so we have provided all these required informations here. Now we will just click on save. Okay. So our auth provider has been created. So once auth provider gets created, you get all this information, that is your callback URL and all other informations here. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll take this callback URL. I'll come to my connected app, and in the sample app, I'll update the connected URL, callback URL, sorry. Okay. So this callback URL, I will update it here. If you don't update it, that's also fine. It's not a completely necessary thing, but yeah, I'm just updating so that after authorization, it will be sent back to my authorization system or the consumer system. Okay. Now we have created the auth provider. Next step is we will create a name credential. Okay. So we'll just go to name credential, and okay, so I'll switch to classic because I'm a old school guy, so I like classic more. So I'll navigate via classic. Okay, so I can just come here, name credentials. You have an option to create a new name credential. I'll just click on this. Okay, now what I need to first do here, first I'll give the label. So label I'll give as let's say devorg connection. Okay, so this and then name again, it's going to take it automatically. Now, the URL what we need to give here is it will be our org URL which we will be using to fetch the data. So in our case, we will just give this URL. Okay, I'll give this URL. Now, if you have any certificate or something, that also you can use in this. You can provide the certificate details. We don't have any certificate, so we are basically going to avoid that at this moment. Okay. Now, how the identity type will happen. Okay, so I'll keep it as per user, and then authentication protocol we will use it as OAuth 2.0. We have others as well, password authentication, JWT and other stuffs. We will use OAuth 2.0. Okay, now as soon as I selected OAuth 2.0, it is asking me for the auth provider. So this is where we are going to use the auth provider which we have used in our previous step. Okay, now we have another options as well, like we have named principals, and we have anonymous. So anonymous is like if you just if you want to hit any free website or free API, there you can use the anonymous as well. Okay, so in our case, let's say if you're using per user or named principal. So let's say I'm going to use here named principal. Okay. And then if you can see, there is an option called start authentication flow on save. Okay. So we will keep it as checked. Okay. I'll tell you why we are keeping this as checked. Okay. And then we have some other options if you want to send some merge fields into the body, or if you want to send some merge fields into your HTTP headers. For that, you can mark this checkbox as true like this. Okay. So these are some additional informations if you want to send it over on a dynamic basis. Okay. So we have provided the necessary informations of creating the named credentials. Okay. Now let's see after clicking on save what happens. Okay. So as soon as we clicked on save, what it did, it took us to the login page of our provider org. Okay. So here I can just give my username and password. Okay, so now you can see as soon as I provided my username and password there. Okay, yeah, so here my authentication status now telling that I have been authenticated successfully as this particular user. Okay, so this user is available in my provider org. Okay, so what I did now, as soon as I clicked on save, okay, system took me to the provider org where I need to give the uh, credential of any of the provider users. Okay, in context of whom we will be retrieving the data. Usually they are known as integration users in most of the enterprise applications. Okay, but it can be any user, it can be any admin, or based on whatever your level of access you want to give, you can use that particular user. So as soon as it took me there, I gave the credentials. Okay. So as you have seen, we are not storing these credentials anywhere now. Okay. We are not storing the username password anywhere. This has been taken care in backend by Salesforce. Okay. So here we are just providing the username and password on the UI, and as soon as you clicked it, did a it did an authentication with the provider app or the provider system, provider Salesforce org, and it said that okay, this is a legit user, it's a valid user. Okay, and then it sends me back the it basically redirected me back to my consumer application, and after that you're seeing the status as authenticated here. Okay, now this basically issue of warning you are seeing because the connected app which I have used is not having the refresh token setting enabled on that. If you check on the refresh token setting enabled, then you will not be getting this issue. It will be more of you can use the same connection again and again because you have the refresh token. Okay, so now we have created the name credentials, we have done the authentication successfully. Now the last and final step, we will see whether this is going to work or not, or how we are going to use this in our actual callout. So for that, we will go to our developer console, an anonymous window, and then we will just try to hit an HTTP callout, okay, with this particular name credentials. So before we check on whether that is working or not, one thing I missed to mention here. So you need to provide the scope as well. So let's say if you are using the provider's information, you are fetching the provider information via API or something, then you can use API, and then if you're also looking for the refresh token, you can just mention scope as refresh token as well. Okay. So so now as you can see, after adding this API and refresh token, the issue which we were seeing, or the warning which we were seeing here of that the refresh token is not available, that is gone. So that's where you are configuring the name credential to check for the refresh token as well if your existing token has been expired. Okay, so we just added the scope, that is API and refresh token, and now let's see how we are going to test it. So we'll just go to our anonymous blog. Okay, I'll just write a simple query. So as you know, Salesforce provides an existing some out of the box APIs as well to test and play around it. Okay. So what I am doing here is I've just created a simple query, that is select ID comma name from account. Okay. Now I have created an HTTP request. I am setting an endpoint. So in the endpoint, if you see, the format is call out followed by the colon, and then next is your name credential API name. The name credential API name which I have just created. That is our dev or connection. Followed by your further URLs where you are actually going to hit to get the resources. So in our case, it is like services followed by data followed by version, and then q equals the query which I have just created here. Okay, method type I am setting it as get, and then I'm just going to do a normal call out. Okay, so after doing this execute, let's see what our response is going to be. Okay, so as you can see now here, the status code is coming as 200. 200 means your authentication and the request has been successful. So you have 200 or 201, both states that okay, request has been successful. Okay, and now in the body I'm getting all the data which you can parse, and you can do whatever the further business logic you want to apply on it. Okay, so this is how we usually use the name credentials, and this is how we have seen we can connect the two Salesforce orgs by using the name credentials. Okay, one of the so till now we have seen we have connected two orgs, we have seen how it is going to work. What are the advantages here? Okay, so advantage is you enhance security. So basically, name credentials are not only providing the OAuth way of connecting, but it can also do with the JWT and all other certificates and other authentication process. So that's where your name credential is having a higher level of security based on your need. You can select what type of security you want to apply on your callouts. Okay, then you have one centralized system. So for example, that you have 10 Apex classes which is using the same callout. Okay, so in the traditional way, earlier you used to send the username, password, and all those things, and if any changes happens, then you have to make change in all the Apex classes, and then you have to send it. You have to push the Apex classes. But okay, but here now that's not the case. Okay, here you have only one place where you can just go and update your credential, or you can just revalidate your your authorization and authentications, and then it will be reflected in all the other places without even changing any Apex class or anything. Okay, so this is where your centralized management systems comes into picture, where from one place you are managing the whole authentication process. Next is hard coding. So we are not doing so in the whole process till now, whatever the demo I have showed you, we are not hard coding any of the username and password. Okay, so this critical information we are not hard coding it anywhere. This means you are securing your provider system as well whenever you're doing a call out. Ease of maintenance, again, as you have seen, we do, we have only one place from where you can easily manage everything. So that's why it is having an ease of maintenance as well, where you can just you don't need to run around on the different places and do the things. Instead, from one place you can manage everything. You have dynamic authentication. So as you have seen, I have added refresh token in the scope. Okay, so that's where as soon as you do the call out, the authentication and that process will be taken care automatically by the system from the backend. Okay, we just need to provide the name credential, and then in backend it will automatically do the authentication. It will get the bearer token, it will set the bearer token. All those things will be taken care in backend automatically. Okay, and then you have OAuth handling. So basically, name credential simplifies the process of obtaining the access token. So when we provide the refresh token or the access token in the scopes, it automatically gets the access token and it apply to your callouts. Okay, so these are some of the advantages of using the name credential. So I hope you got an idea of how name credential works and how you can use the name credentials in your um, integration callout. So we have done Salesforce to Salesforce connection. You can do any number of connection. You can even do with the your Google. You can do with your Apple. You can do with your Facebook. So whatever the provider types we have seen. So by using those auth provider, you can configure the different auth providers, and then you can use it in your name credentials. Okay, so with this, I think we have come to the end of our video. I hope you liked this video, you found it more informative, and we will come up with more videos soon. And if you have any recommendation related to any particular topic related video you are looking for, you can definitely ping me and I'll try to come up with that video as well. So with this, I will wrap up today's video. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.